of dollars developing that technology over 20 years. And then, like you said, the second and third copies have already come out, and they're far less expensive. Once you've seen how somebody's done something, it's pretty easy to do it.
Well, this is where it gets tricky. Just because someone spent too much money coming up with their software doesn't mean that all software should have a patent. I think you want to choose the rule that would lead to the greatest net level of new invention. And I think in the case of software, it would be either no patents or a patent system that's reformed, so it's much harder to file these lawsuits. So yeah, but I would say that I'm not. I'm trying to. I'm pretty much limiting my comments or my attack on it's not really an attack. It's my call for patent reform is really limited to the software space because some of these other areas are outside my expertise.
Yeah, no, it's and they're certainly different. So what else is going on? What are you seeing in the social world? You meet with every executive probably around the world. What are you seeing happen? What's happening in the world of business right now? It's sort of interesting to watch.
Wow, that's a very big question.
I'll lay out a big one, so see what kind of answer comes back.
I think we're if you talk about like larger movements, one of the things we're pretty interested in is the idea of employee empowerment. That there's a shift going on from kind of command and control type management structures to much more bottom up, grassroots, sort of again empowered type management structures. And
at Rackspace, we believe a lot in that. I don't really have a boss telling me, "Oh, go interview David Sachs." I just figure out what I want to do, and they say, "Go do it."
Right, exactly. So
the new business is weird.
Yeah, so
it's unnerving to people who like the top-down approach, right? Like a military style approach.
Yeah, I mean, so what we've said is that we're not trying to blow up the org chart. We're not anarchists. Companies do need some hierarchy and structure. It's just that the org chart is a very inefficient way to distribute information within a company because, if you have a question and somebody else on the other side of the company has the answer, you don't have to go sort of up to your manager, across, down. You'll probably never even find the person who has the right answer. Or you could have people in the company who are working on the same subject matter but in different departmental silos, and so they'll never find out about each other. And so you want a way to enable all the people in the company to be able to connect with each other and share information that's not strictly defined by the org chart. What I like to tell companies is that if they're not using an enterprise social network like Yammer, they do have a social network. It's the org chart, but instead of looking like a social graph where every node is connected to every other node, and it's this. You've seen what an org chart looks like. It's a bunch of boxes and lines, and it's a very, very.
We've switched to Workday now, and so it's actually a bunch of little circles.
So it's like a very conscripted way of people talking to each other.
Yeah.
So it does pose some challenges for executives. I do think that they have to be more open to dissent potentially than they otherwise would. Yeah. I do think that it's better to let your employees speak out about something. And be aware of the issue, then kind of try and prohibit the speech or create a company culture that makes it feel unwelcome. Yeah. Because people will just be having these conversations anyway. Maybe they'll be on Facebook having them, or they'll be having them around the water cooler in the hallways, and you just won't know about it. We've had some really great examples of CEOs, like the CEO of Deloitte Australia gave a great interview where he was talking about how there was some policy that was issued at his company. I think it was like an HR type policy. Yep. And people were really against it, but they didn't know about it until it got discussed on Yammer. And then he saw the conversation, and he assigned his HR director to go talk to the person who posted about it. And they had lunch, and they figured out a fix for it a day later. And so it was something that was easily fixed, but had he not known about it, it would have really festered. Yep. And just would have made employees unhappy. And so we almost never see employees post inappropriate things on Yammer, but the transparency, I think, is something that's good.
No, you don't see people posting porn pictures or anything like that.
Well, people.
That's not a good. No. That's not a career. That's a career limiting move, I think.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Employees don't go to work to get fired. Yeah. Generally, there are plenty of ways to get fired or quit or something other than posting something on Yammer. So it just never happens, But I do think there are a lot of opportunities for executives through these types of technology. I mean, I think every CEO wants to have more visibility into both what's happening in their company and what's happening in their marketplace. And so the additional transparency that social media provides is, a huge opportunity for executives.
That's exactly why Rackspace pays me to go around the world and study not just what's happening with our customers, but what's happening in the world, just so that they know what's going on.
Yeah.
Not everybody can come here and have lunch with you,
Yeah. Well.
What else is going on? Any last thoughts?
Well, let's see. We just raised a big financing round.
Yeah.
So we raised $85 million.
Who was involved in that?
Well, DFJ led the round with a few new investors. So Coastal Ventures, Meritech, Capricorn, and then there were some angel investors.
Smart people.
Like Max Levchin came in. Well, he was already an investor, but he re-upped. And then
whenever I hear some of these names, smart, really smart people. So that tells
Ronnie Lott, a Hall of Famer, invested, so it was great to get him on board. And then all of our current investors basically re-upped. So
how is this phase when you're raising? Is that a Series B or C or where?
This would be like a growth round. So I think this is our. Well, we'd pretty much done 3.5 rounds before, so this would be kind of.
What was that process like, and how did it differ from going into an angel investor or trying to get somebody to invest in you before you won TechCrunch Disrupt?
The process was pretty similar. I mean, you go to Sand Hill Road, you meet with a bunch of VCs over the course of a week, and then by the end of it, you hopefully have some term sheets, and then you kind of go from there. I would say this is probably the easiest financing we've done. We raised the most money, and it was the easiest one to do.
Is that because the market now is happening and it's easier to convince people that something's going on here? When you're in the early phase of a business, it's hard to convince. Like the guys who started highlighting, there's a lot of people who say that's the stupidest thing they've ever seen, right? Because it's small, 40,000 people using it, a lot of churn, a lot of angst.
Right. Well, I think the market is better now than it was when we did our first round, where we raised, I guess our first round, we raised $5 million in January 2009, and we were just like pretty much in the middle of that whole, I guess September 2008 was the whole Lehman Brothers crisis, so it was like pretty much in the midst of a meltdown. But so it's definitely better now. I would say it's not the best it's ever been, but the market is fine. I would say that.
What does your deck look like? And I'll tell you why I'm asking in a second. But how simple is it? How many pages?
It's about 20. I want to say probably about 25 pages, something like that. And then we've got a bunch of backup slides. So the core story is about, you start with that, and then we probably got 20 pages of backup for frequently asked questions that you don't want to put them in the main story, but they come up frequently enough you want to have slides ready.
The reason I asked, I was just on the startup bus and we were trying to come up with ideas and pitches and all that stuff. And I used you as an example because Yammer is like, I can say it in 3 words. It's Twitter for enterprise, right? It's a really easy idea. Yeah. But it's a really easy idea to tell somebody else what it does,
Right.
And a lot of people come up with these convoluted things that take 14 minutes to explain to you.
Right.
And by then the investors are asleep, and I'm asleep as a press guy or a user.
Right. So I mean, so I agree with that. I think it's important for entrepreneurs to figure out a concise way of expressing what their company does. There's a line in the movie The Player. It's about Hollywood, but this is like the one piece of advice from Hollywood that I think applies to startups, which is you should be able to pitch. In Griffin Mill in the movie says pitch your idea in 25 words or less. I would modify that to be 10 words or less. I
think you got it down to 3.
Now the words can actually change. I would again, we would define ourselves as an enterprise social network. I think that Twitter for Enterprises was a useful thing to hang our hat on when we first launched, but the product has grown so much from there. We we don't have the 140 character limit. There's no so it's not micro blogging anymore. It's we have full sort of threaded conversations. We have applications. We have file sharing pages, praise groups. It's a little bit more like I think Facebook's model. We're using Open Graph. We're extending Open Graph to Enterprise. So it's still 3 words. It's still 3 words. Yeah. So I do think that's important. Is try and get it down to a handful of words. So I agree with you.
But does having that simplicity of vision and good story help you? It obviously helps you raise funding because you're raising $85 million.
Well, it helps in general having clarity around what you're trying to do, and if you can't express it concisely, you're going to have trouble not just with investors but also trying to recruit employees because they're not going to understand what you're doing. You may not have enough clarity in your own mind so that when you design the website, users can grok what it is in about 10 seconds. I mean, you want a site so that when a user first hits it, they can immediately understand what this thing is and whether they want to engage with it further. And if your own thinking is kind of jumbled in terms of how you express this, then your UI might be kind of jumbled as well.
Well, we've gone for 40 minutes, so I
all right,
think
sounds
enough.
good.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, good to talk to you.
That's great. Where do we learn more about you?
I guess Yammer.com.
Yeah, and you're on Twitter and Facebook?
I'm on Twitter, yeah. It's at David Sachs on Twitter. SACKS is how my last name is spelled. So, I'm sure I'll be speaking out more on the whole Yahoo patent troll issue. So,
keep in touch.
should be fun.
Thank you so much.
Okay.